welcome back to Live and Breathe Horses, and we're going on with this fabulous book from Tom Dorrance, More Than a Horseman, which is the stories about him by those who knew and loved him. Today's story is from Roberta Dzimiela. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Dzimiela? Okay. I'm not sure where to start. Like many things for me, what should be simple is proved to be somewhat difficult. Tom was a big part of my life, and the timing of our friendship was instrumental. To say Tom helped me with horses would be an understatement. He helped me with myself, my kids, and with life in general. I was old enough to know that what he was saying was worth listening to, even though I can't say I understood. And I was young enough that it influenced the way I raised my two girls. It's because of him that I often think the term horsemanship is not adequate. The things we learn are not left in the barn when we hang our bridles up at the end of the day. I really didn't have much experience with horses. I didn't grow up with them, and in fact, I didn't get my first horse until after my girls were born. I was hooked with my first horse, which I actually bought for my oldest daughter. I loved horses and I loved riding. Before I met Tom, I wasn't smart enough to not be afraid to do things, which, in hindsight, makes me grateful I survived. I would offer to train people's horses for free, and most would take me up on the offer. I would just saddle a horse for the first time out in the middle of a big pasture and get right on and go. I started college with the intention of applying to vet school. My kids were little and I wanted to make a better life for them. Tom's book was one of my classes. I'd read it over and over, but it wasn't easy reading for me. I was interested in what I thought I understood from his words. Somehow, I ended up leaving college and starting horses for the public. There is real meaning to the saying, ignorance is bliss. I wasn't paid by people to ride their horses based on my experience, as I didn't have much, but rather on my willingness to just saddle up and head down the trails. Needless to say, I ran into problems. I would seek out help from local trainers, but I was never really satisfied with their advice. I can still remember the day I was struggling with an Arabian gelding. I'd gotten down off him while riding out in a big open field. I was in a state of frustration and self-pity. I didn't know what to do with him, but our rides were progressively getting worse and realistically, probably out of control. Why was he being like this? I did not want to give up, but I didn't know where to turn for help. I put the horse up and went and got Tom's book. I made an impulsive decision to call him. My reasoning was that I'd been seeking help from people around me, and why not go to the one person I knew I could trust? I knew from his book that he was in Salinas, California, so I called directory assistance and got his phone number. I remember looking at the number on the piece of paper and questioning whether or not I should actually call. Why would he take a call from me? Does he even answer his own phone, or does he have people? Would he get upset that I looked him up this way? But I was stuck with this horse and I knew it. Without some help, I would have to send him home. I dialed the phone number, and before I could chicken out. That is where my friendship with Tom began. Not only did he talk with me that day, I often called him several times a week to talk about each of the horses I rode. I sent him videos and he would watch the videos and offer his insight. I will admit it took me a while to get over the shock that he would take the time to talk with me, an inexperienced person from Wisconsin that did not know how to throw a rope or do competitive manoeuvres. I was very aware of the things I did not know, but one of the things that made Tom so unique was that he never focused on what I did not know. In fact, he made me feel very comfortable. There were times I would call and he would have company at the house. Instead of telling me he was busy, he would ask if I was in a situation that required immediate attention. Even with all of his successes, he made himself available and made me feel like I was worth talking to. At the time, I'm not sure I realised how those conversations were slowly but surely changing my life. Tom had a great sense of humour. I can still hear the way he would laugh. One thing that sticks out is how he could go from laughing about something to becoming very serious and thoughtful. A lot of our conversations would involve me starting with my version of what was taking place. When I would finish, he would often say, in a drawn-out sort of way, "Okay," and then proceed with his version. Some of our conversations would end with, "Go try that, and when that doesn't work, call me, and I will give you something else to try that doesn't work." Just thinking about that makes me smile. I do not remember the topic of conversation one occasion, but I remember his reply. "There is no truth in a good story." And then he chuckled. We talked a lot about my kids. When my girls would ride, I did not interfere. They often rode bareback just because they didn't want to take the time to saddle up. They would pack lunches and go off on their horses to have picnics. I would sometimes question my approach. Should I be teaching them things such as proper position? Tom would encourage me to let them ride as they wanted, to let them have fun with their horses without worrying about where their heels were. He showed a genuine interest in my girls, not just the horse-related stories, and that is part of what made me feel that we had a friendship, not just a relationship that revolved around horses. I was confident he would always know what would help my horse. When I asked him a question, he would sometimes get quiet for a short time. I believe this is because he was trying to figure out how to present it to me and in a way that I might understand and be able to help my horse. Shortly after Tom passed away, there was a part of me that wished I documented more from our conversations. Then I would have had pages of notes to refer to. I think that was the part of me that didn't want to accept he was gone. I miss him terribly. I realise now that making notes of our conversation might have actually caused me to miss out on some important things. It wasn't the words he was saying, but the meaning behind them. If I'd taken notes, I might have become dependent on the words themselves without knowing what to do with them. It was not unusual for me to be working with a horse and to wonder, what would Tom do? It took me a while to realise Tom might not be satisfied with that kind of thinking. I think Tom would have encouraged me not to wonder what he would do, but instead of having me try things on my own. At first, that acknowledgement left me feeling alone, almost isolated. To be honest, I was afraid. I was afraid of making mistakes and to not have him to turn to. I had yet to truly comprehend how the mistakes I would make would be necessary for me to continue to learn. I needed to allow myself to have the confidence he had wanted me to have. Laziness might have been a factor as well. In some ways, it can be a lot of work to try to figure things out on our own. Even though it seemed like things should be easy, I often went about things in a manner that complicated them. There were so many horses I talked with him about. I remember this little paint horse named Pegasus. On every ride at the same spot, he would stop his feet and I would have a really hard time getting him moving again. I remember Tom saying, "Try not to let his feet stop." It seemed so simple when he put it like that, but it wasn't that easy for me. In fact, looking back, it helped me to understand that it was important to know where the feet are and to be aware of what's happening before what happens. I also realised that I was actually expecting Pegasus to stop and would go into a defensive mode where it would have become a contest. In other words, I was not thinking about other options, but instead about how I could win. On several occasions, Tom would remind me that until we have the life of their feet in our hands, we're at their mercy. I've thought of that many times over the years. Pegasus would also root on the bit. He would take hold of the bit and lower his head, often shaking it. My response was to want to pull him back. Tom suggested I not let Pegasus get the bit and to put my reins way forward so that I didn't give Pegasus anything to pull on. Tom also, in a way Tom was so good at, helped me realise that I was the cause of it happening in the first place. He would say things in a way that allowed me to learn. It did not turn me away from my ignorance or criticise me in a way that would humiliate me. Instead, he would offer things to help me understand that I needed to look at what I was doing and what my role was. There was a horse named Bonnie that I thought was lazy. She would just poke along and it would drive me insane. After watching the tape I sent him, Tom said, "You don't like her much." That stunned me and made me think quite a bit. I don't think I will ever forget that. It reminded me that we cannot necessarily hide what we're feeling and that our intentions are known to the horse. There was another little horse named Levi. It seemed she was scared of everything. Literally, I remember her almost falling to the ground when a flock of geese flew overhead. I sent Tom several videotapes of her. One of his comments really sticks out. "She'll be a good horse for kids someday." Comments like that would literally silence me. My head would be spinning so much I couldn't even gather my thoughts enough to question him at the moment. It just shows that everything is not always how it seems. I also remember Tom telling me that I should trim Levi's feet. I'm still thinking on that one. It seemed to come out of the blue and I didn't have any experience with trimming. Tom never told me exactly what to do. He would offer other advice in the form of concepts enabling me to not become focused on technique. I do not ever remember him offering the same advice twice, regardless of how similar the horse and/or the situation appeared. The way he presented things created the opportunity to approach each situation differently. That would sometimes be frustrating, as it put the responsibility back on me. I knew I had to learn how to look at each horse, each situation as unique. At the time, it seemed like it would have been easier to have a set of rules that applied to different horses, but that wasn't how Tom did things. In hindsight, I also realised that it wouldn't have been really easy, as I would have missed a lot of good experiences. My talks with Tom had a way of motivating me, of getting me excited to go try something different, just to see what would happen. I realised that in a way, it wasn't about what I could or couldn't accomplish. It wasn't even always about me, but about me and the horse, and all the learning opportunities that went along with it. It took me some time to realise perhaps the most valuable thing I learned, all the things we talked about did not apply just to working the horses. There was no way I could separate it or keep it out of my non-horse life, such as raising my girls. Tom lived the way he talked about things. It didn't matter if he was in the saddle. He was what he talked about. I never met anyone else like him. He taught me about perspective and patience and how to enjoy what I was doing. As a matter of fact, from one perspective, he taught me without effort on his part because what he offered was himself. He taught by example. He wasn't saying things to try to get me to buy something or do things his way. Really, he was encouraging me, in my opinion, to learn to do things in a way that felt good to me. From him, I learned to appreciate and recognise the value in the small things in life, which if missed, disrupt the bigger picture. I honestly don't know if I would have figured that out on my own. I learned how to respect a horse for what they are and how not to feel sorry for them. That sympathy may stand in the way of progress. Without Tom's influence, it might have been easy for me to just accept things in life without challenging myself. By nature, I tend to be lazy, so I may not have learned to look at situations from different angles. Furthermore, I may not have accepted responsibility for the choice. I do have in many situations. How do I choose to react to this? I may have taken another road and placed blame on external things. Whether horse-related or not, I might have resigned to saying things such as, well, it's out of my control. It's quite possible I may have even been guilty of believing that would strip me of the opportunity to learn. What I've told people, this horse is just lazy. Would I have told people, this horse is just lazy, you should get rid of him. I learned not to feel guilty about things that happened or didn't happen, but to be grateful for how things turned out. Everybody should have someone like Tom in their lives, but I don't know that there is anyone else out there like him. Tom would never accept payment for his help or his time. I was a single mother, and it would have been difficult for me to afford what his time was probably worth. It seemed like, for Tom, it wasn't about him or the money he could charge me. It seemed to be about sharing what he knew in hopes of helping people and horses. And in reality, he helped me in so many ways. It had never been hard to put into words how he's impacted my life. To this day, I think of him often, even though our conversations did not take place sitting side by side in the saddle or at the kitchen table. What I learned from him became a part of who I am. How does one put someone like that into words? I'm still trying to get better with my horses, and I know the learning will never end. Because of him, I believe that it doesn't matter what I don't know sometimes. What matters is that I keep trying. I do still catch myself thinking about what he might say about certain things. As I ride, I think about seeing a painted white line out ahead of me and try to stay in the middle of it. I think about the horse's expression, the life in their feet, my approach, my timing, how they leave, and so much more. I remind myself to not try too hard, because by doing so, I will actually get in my own way. It has been a challenge for me to find that balance. When I first started visiting with Tom, I had him on a pedestal. He seemed to have this inhuman ability with horses. Quite frankly, he stayed on that pedestal, but I did realise that while he was a remarkable human, he was still human, and that made it so much more valuable to me. He was real. He was not untouchable, and he did not ask to be put on that pedestal. Despite changing the way thousands of people approached horses and life, despite being legendary, he was humble, and I considered him a friend. Oh, that's lovely. It made me very emotional, that story. So thank you for joining me today. Keep tuning into the light, and I'll look forward to see you next time.